2022 is coming to an end. What will happen in 2023? War to persist. Inflation, food prices soars and famine. Worsening global warming with drought and flooding worldwide. Yes, they are the forecasts by Michel de Nostradamus, a French astrologer, apothecary, physician, and reputed seer, who is best known for his book, Les Prophéties, a collection of 942 poetic verses supposedly predicting future events. How are the stock markets, interest rates, currencies, and commodities prices in 2023? Intellectual Wall Street bankers and notorious investors like Michael Burry, Nouriel Roubini, Robert Kiyosaki tell you they are very cautious. Let's see what they say. Nostradamus, his legion of devotees, said approximately 70% of his predictions came true. Saying Hitler, the moon landing, and the COVID pandemic have all been predicted by Nostradamus. His Les Prophéties are categorized into different centuries, each with 100 quatrains. Much of 2023's predictions are taken from Century 4, stanza 100. Let me tell you a few of them here.
First, there will be 7 months Great War, people dead through evil.
This prediction could be a reference to the current conflict between Ukraine and Russia. It is forecasting an escalation to real conflict between Russia and the Western world, or so-called World War III next year.
Second, from the translation, it said, "So high will the bushel of wheat rise, that man will be eating his fellow man."
Think most of us will immediately think of the hyperinflation, energy, and food shortage now happening in Europe because of the Ukraine warfare. From the prophecy, it appears the situation is not getting better in 2023, but even worse.
Third, it wrote, "For 40 years the rainbow will not be seen. For 40 years it will be seen every day. The dry earth will grow more parched, and there will be great floods when it is seen."
Likely, it is telling us that global warming is becoming more severe in 2023. There will be drought and great floods on Earth.
Fourth, he also covered our top richest man on Earth, Elon Musk. The prophecy wrote when the light of Mars will go out in 2023.
Does it mean that Elon Musk's SpaceX plan to Mars will call off finally? If it is, then Tesla may not be a good choice for the rebound in 2023. After all these fantasies, let's back down to earth to see how our intellectual Wall Street bankers and notorious investors predict the investment prospect in 2023. There are going to be the top 10 predictions.
Top 1, relaxing COVID controls and China reopening.
Indeed, this is not a forecast, but is happening. The world has taken off those COVID controls and measures as early as mid of 2022. Now even the most stubborn China starts off the relaxing measures and is planning to fully reopen in 2023. Morgan Stanley researched that recovering private consumption in the 1.4 billion populated China market could lead a modest recovery in the global economy next year.
We're forecasting 5% growth in 2023 in China, with most of that coming in the second half of the year when the economy is expected to fully reopen following the repeal of COVID-0 policies early in the year.
In addition, to the opposite of the global tightening, China is the country that is trying to rehabilitate the economy by expanding monetary policy and fiscal policy.
Top 2, recession to come.
Michael Burry, the hedge fund boss made famous in the 2015 film, The Big Short, rose to fame after he predicted the 2008 US housing crash and managed to net $100 million in personal profits. He said a multi-year recession was essentially unavoidable because the Fed lacks good options to address the situation. JP Morgan Research said,
"The global economy is projected to expand at a sluggish pace of around 1.6% in 2023 as financial conditions tighten. The global economy is not at imminent risk of sliding into recession, as the sharp decline in inflation helps promote growth, but a U.S. recession is likely before the end of 2024.
Goldman Sachs Research also forecasts recessions in Europe while the US narrowly avoids a downturn. Morgan Stanley is a bit more optimistic.
With excessive post-COVID consumer demand, bloated retail inventories, and the battle against inflation continuing to weigh on growth in 2023, they believe global GDP growth will top out at just 2.2%, narrowly defying recession, but lower than the 3% growth expected for 2022.
Nevertheless, the U.S. Q3 gross domestic product GDP recorded a positive 3.2% growth after the two consecutive negative growth in Q1 and Q2. And Euro area plus UK will have even a tougher road ahead. Morgan Stanley expects the Euro area economy to contract 0.2% in 2023, while UK economy will decline 1.5% in 2023. The Bank of England is thus likely to end its rate hikes at 4% and follow the Fed in cutting in early 2024.
Top 3. Inflation to decline.
After a series of rate hike actions led by the Federal Reserve in 2022, global inflation has come off from its double digits peaks. New bond king Jeffrey Gundlach said inflation is declining and will continue to do into the middle of 2023, likely reaching 4% in 6 or 7 months. Gundlach remarked the Consumer Price Index has peaked and noting that the ISM Purchasing Managers Index is plummeting. Wall Street bankers said the same. JP Morgan said,
inflation already showing signs of softening.
Goldman Sachs also expects inflation to decline in 2023. Morgan Stanley said global inflation is set to peak in the fourth quarter of 2022. Tapering inflation and the following rate cut should be positive to the global economy as well as global stock markets in 2023.
Top 4. Interest rate peaked and central banks cut interest rates.
JP Morgan Research wrote,
Central banks will likely be forced to pivot and signal cutting interest rates sometime next year, which should result in a sustained recovery of asset prices and subsequently the economy by the end of 2023.
Is it the opportunity for bond investment? With inflation already showing signs of softening, JP Morgan said.
The Fed is expected to dial down the tightening pace further and deliver 25 BP hikes at both the February and March meetings. It is expected to pause rate hikes thereafter.
Goldman Sachs research suggested.
As central banks ratchet up interest rates to contain inflation, high-grade bonds are starting to give stocks a run for their money.
After a sharp increase in bond yields this year, new and potentially less risky alternatives are emerging in fixed income. U.S. investment-grade corporate bonds yield almost 6%, have little refinancing risk, and are relatively insulated from an economic downturn. Morgan Stanley also agreed that the combination of slowing growth and cooling inflation is likely to prompt the Fed to curb its rate hike.
We expect the target range to reach a peak of 4.5% to 4.75% by January 2023, hold at that level through 2023, and then decline steadily throughout 2024. Overall, 2023 will be a good year for income investing. Bonds, the biggest losers of 2022, could be the biggest winners in 2023 as global macro trends temper inflation next year and central banks pause their rate hikes. This is particularly true for high-quality bonds, which historically have performed well after the Federal Reserve stops raising interest rates, even when a recession follows.
Top 5. Equities may continue to probe its bottom.
JP Morgan Research predicts.
In the first half of 2023, the S&P 500 is expected to retest the lows of 2022 to 3,500 level, but a pivot from the Fed could drive an asset recovery later in the year, pushing the S&P 500 to 4,200 by year-end.
Nouriel Roubini, a New York University professor emeritus known for his pessimistic economic predictions, and commonly known as Mr. Doom, warned the S&P 500 could plunge another 25% in the event of a severe downturn in 2023.
During the global financial crisis, the S&P 500 fell by 50%. You have another 25% downside potentially in the markets.
Roubini said. Roubini has warned for months that the U.S. economy will suffer a hard landing, as the Federal Reserve sharply hikes interest rates to tackle inflation. Oh, the equity market's outlook sound a bit worrisome. In a reversal from previous years, the cost of capital has gone up substantially, hitting valuations for fast-growing companies whose profits are expected to materialize in the future. Earnings at the big tech companies have mostly fallen behind analysts' expectations.
Top 6. Asia is upbeat.
Morgan Stanley said Asia's outlook for the year ahead is relatively upbeat, with 3 of the world's largest economies helping to lead the way. They are China, India, and Japan. China, as covered in Top 1, is going to fully reopen in 2023. In Japan, Bank of Japan's action to widen the target interest rate band may signal the end of negative interest rate next year. The expectation may lead to Japanese overseas monies flowing back into Japan. Morgan Stanley expects the GDP of India will be on track to expand 6.2% in 2023, and 6.4% in 2024. While 3 megatrends, the global offshoring, digitalization, and energy transition, underpinned by the country's advanced digital infrastructure, are putting India on a path to surpass Japan and Germany and become the world's 3rd largest economy by 2027. This strength isn't limited to Asia's largest economies. Many countries in the region are poised for growth in the year ahead, and that could prove positive for the rest of the world economy.
Top 7. Strong US dollar to persist in 2023, but lesser strength.
JP Morgan expects further dollar strength in 2023. Weak growth outside the U.S. remains a pillar of USD strength in 2023. To the opposite, Morgan Stanley expects the US dollar to peak in 2022 and declines through 2023. Indeed, the US dollar index has started sliding from its peak at 114 attained in early October 2022, and is trending downward. Robert Kiyosaki, entrepreneur and best-selling author of Rich Dad Poor Dad, said that after the Fed pivot and lowered interest rates, the dollar fall could occur as soon as January 2023. This would make the US dollar fall in the same way that the British pound collapsed.
Top 8. Gold will go up.
Robert Kiyosaki long called that precious metals, particularly gold and silver, have been a popular hedge against inflation and uncertainty. 2023 will still be a year of uncertainties, with risks of wars and pandemic persisting. Precious metals like gold and silver can't be printed out of thin air like fiat money, and their value is largely unaffected by economic events around the world. Robert Kiyosaki said,
"I'm not buying gold because I like gold. I'm buying gold because I don't trust the Fed."
JP Morgan also forecast gold price is stable at $1,860 in 2023.
Top 9. Commodities are favored.
Goldman is bullish on commodities in 2023. Goldman predicted,
From a fundamental perspective, the setup for most commodities next year is more bullish than it has been at any point since we first highlighted the supercycle in October 2020. Despite the recent price declines, commodities will still likely finish the year as the best performing asset class in 2022, with 23% returns following 42% returns in 2021. Commodities will gain 43% in 2023 as supply shortages bite. Geopolitical and energy risks, particularly in Europe, continuing to restrict the supply while China reopen and recover may boost the demand. Metals and mining sectors, in general, is poised to materially outperform the broader equity markets once again.
Top 10. Bitcoin outlook is mixed.
Standard Chartered Bank forecast is quite bearish. They said,
Bitcoin could drop to $5,000 next year, marking a 70% plunge from the current level of around $17,000. Rising yields along with a plunge in technology stocks will lead to an acceleration of the Bitcoin sell-off and cause further bankruptcies and collapses in the crypto world.
Robert Kiyosaki warned investors to
Get Bitcoins and save yourself. It's not enough to just want to get into crypto. Now is the time you need to get into crypto, before the biggest economic crash in history.
Crypto world fans are believing that the cryptocurrency had enough momentum to hit the 6-digit mark of $100,000 in 2023. In Bitcoin's history, there have only been 3 years that haven't produced a return of at least 48%. I wish the above top 10 forecasts give you some insight into the 2023 investment environment, forecasting by the major market players. Pretty bearish? Yes, I agree. But don't forget the contrarian. Warren Buffett's motto is, be fearful when others are greedy, be greedy when others are fearful.
I suspect Warren Buffett is going to be buying a lot of stock next year.
Remarked the Tesla, SpaceX, and Twitter CEO Elon Musk.
If a company has very strong fundamentals, but then the market is doing some short-term panic situation, obviously that's the right time to buy stock.
Musk added. Well, so is Musk bullish or bearish to 2023? Lastly, wish all of us good luck in 2023 and our wealth keeps growing at all market situations.